Many years ago, during my uni days, I got to take part in what you might call an impromptu international readers convention, by which I mean that three other girls from my university and I all happened to be in the same computer lounge close to midnight, working on our essays and needing a break. So we all talked to each other about our favorite books. I was from the Philippines, another girl was from New Zealand, a third was from Sweden, and a fourth was from Canada. And we could pretty much all discuss the same books. Even if we had not all read them, we were familiar with them. But there was one book and one author that I was absolutely not familiar with. And it was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. At the time, I had never heard of either the novel or the author, and it was awful when someone brought him up and the other two had not just read the book, but loved it. They absolutely loved Douglas Adams. They loved The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I was completely lost. I was also having what I like to call a Judy Abbott moment. And if you know what I mean, then you have also read Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster, whose protagonist and narrator is Judy Abbott. But if you have not read Daddy Longlegs or even heard of it and are having your own Judy Abbott moment right now because you don't know what I mean by Judy Abbott moment, well, it's pretty simple. Judy is an orphaned girl who has spent most of her life in an orphanage. And just as she's about to age out of the system, a generous benefactor offers to give her a full scholarship to college. It's wonderful. She gets to go to college. She's a smart girl, willing to learn, willing to work hard. And as soon as she gets there and meets her classmates who have all had more conventional upbringings with families, she soon realizes that the gaps in her education have more to do than just what she has to learn in the classroom. To fill in the gaps in her knowledge, she creates a parallel personal curriculum for herself that is just about leisure reading. The school year starts on the 24th of September, and by the 19th of December, she is writing this in her letters to her mysterious benefactor. I have a new unbreakable rule. Never, never to study at night, no matter how many written reviews are coming in the morning. Instead, I read just plain books. I have to, you know, because there are 18 blank years behind me. You wouldn't believe, Daddy, what an abyss of ignorance my mind is. I am just realizing the depths myself. The things that most girls with a properly assorted family and a home and friends and a library know by absorption, I have never heard of. For example, I never read Mother Goose, or David Copperfield, or Ivanhoe, or Cinderella, or Bluebeard, or Robinson Crusoe, or Jane Eyre, or Alice in Wonderland, or a word of Rudyard Kipling. I didn't know that Henry VIII was married more than once, or that Shelley was a poet. I didn't know that RLS stood for Robert Louis Stevenson, or that George Eliot was a lady. I had never seen a picture of the Mona Lisa. And it's true, but you won't believe it. I had never heard of Sherlock Holmes. Now, I know all of these things and a lot of others besides, but you can see how much I need to catch up. And oh, but it's fun. I look forward all day to evening, and then I put an engaged on the door and get into my nice red bathrobe and furry slippers and pile all the cushions behind me on the couch and light the brass student lamp at my elbow and read and read and read. One book isn't enough. I have 4 going at once. Just now they're Tennyson's poems and Vanity Fair and Kipling's Plain Tales and Don't Laugh, Little Women. I find that I am the only girl in college who wasn't brought up on Little Women. I haven't told anybody, though. That would stamp me as queer. I just quietly went and bought it with $1.12 of my last month's allowance, and the next time somebody mentions pickled limes, I'll know what she's talking about. What Judy Abbott was reaching towards was a canon. Not the serious canon that was already part of her syllabus in college, but a more popular canon or list of books that she needed to know about in order to really feel part of a literate society. These days, I think much of that canon is filled in by visual media, especially movies. Another Judy Abbott moment that I remember from my uni days didn't involve me, but a close friend of mine who had also been raised in a very sheltered way during her teens. And she had not seen many movies that people took for granted in the 2000s. And she had no idea why, when a group of us watched the third Harry Potter movie, and the scene in which Harry rides Buckbeak, the hippogriff, over the waters, and puts his arms out and, goes woo in excitement, she didn't understand why some of us, while watching, said, "I'm the king of the world," and the others laughed. She had never seen Titanic, so she didn't understand that reference. And we could say that the movie Titanic is canonical in its own way because it has left such an imprint on pop culture that there are some jokes and references that a lot of us take for granted that point back directly to Titanic. Sometimes they're also from other media, like in the Britney Spears music video for Oops, I Did It Again, where she says, "I thought the old lady threw it into the ocean at the end." So we don't need to mention the name of the object that she threw into the ocean. We don't even need to mention the movie. The reference is very clear in our minds. And it doesn't even have to be other media. If people are joking, well, Rose was the real villain of Titanic, or if someone might say about an ex-girlfriend, "She was so selfish. She said the door was only for her. She wouldn't let me on the door. We were drowning, and she swore there was only room for her on the door." That's a debate that lasted for years, which James Cameron actually had to address. What I'm getting at is that if we want to have conversations that are bigger than just the quotidian aspects of life, then we have to have a shared language of symbols and allusions. And that shared language often comes from the stories in our canon. So what do I mean by the canon? Well, in general, these are the books that you should know or should be familiar with because they're considered important, but I would say importance is as importance does, and we don't appreciate canonical books just like people collecting rare Pokemon. They are valuable because they help us to converse with each other, to converse not just in the present time, as in the examples I gave, but also with fellow readers from the past, sometimes the distant past, thousands of years ago, and I dare say in the distant future, also thousands of years from now, if we make it. But there's also no single the canon. Even in Daddy Longlegs, Judy has the books that are in her syllabus. She reads Livy, Cicero, Dumas, and Wordsworth, among others. But then she also has her, I guess we could say, pop culture canon that she reads at night, several examples of which I've already mentioned. Now I'd like to give credit where it's due. This idea of multiple canons may have been floating in the back of my mind since I first read Daddy Longlegs as a teenager, but it was brought to the forefront again by my fellow booktubers at Books I'm Not Reading and The Literate Texan, who are both having fun with the idea that you can have multiple types of canons. And that brings me to the story of another Judy Abbott moment that I got to experience, though again, it wasn't my own Judy Abbott moment. I was with a younger friend at a bookstore. We were browsing, and I was asking her, what were your favorite books when you were young? And she admitted that she hadn't read much when she was younger, but she really wanted to catch up. And when we looked over what was there, because it was a used bookstore, which only sometimes has what you want, but often has what you didn't know you wanted. And we found Anne of Green Gables, which is one of the books that, in my humble N=1 opinion, is part of a girl's canon. Books that enhance girlhood and that can spark connection and conversation among young women and even older women when they're talking about their favorite books and the books that have left a mark on them. To my surprise, that got some pushback from a mutual friend who didn't really think Anne of Green Gables was worthwhile. I don't know why. But the irony is that this other friend would not have had that opinion if he had not also been familiar with Anne of Green Gables already. But it's also worth noting that a canon is not fixed in stone. Two of the authors whom Judy mentions for her Personal Canon Project are Rudyard Kipling and William Makepeace Thackeray. I don't think they are as popularly relevant today as they were in the early 1900s, which is when Judy lived, or wait, she's fictional, which is the time in which Judy would have lived. If we updated Daddy Longlegs for 2026, Judy, instead of reading Thackeray, would probably be reading Jane Austen. And instead of Rudyard Kipling, who was kind of a contemporary, his books were not classics yet, but were popular and highly regarded, maybe she would be reading R.F. Kuang. I actually don't know who the current analog for Rudyard Kipling would be. Argue with me in the comments if you think I should have said someone other than R.F. Kuang. Now, this is not to say that Kipling and Thackeray are no longer essential to know. They may not be mentioned as often in conversations among readers these days, but if we were to read other books from the early 1900s and afterwards, or maybe even a little before, when it comes to Thackeray, we would be able to appreciate them better with a knowledge of these two authors. There's a sense in which reading canonical books, however you want to define the canon, is a big game of catch-up that nobody ever wins, but that you will lose unless you play. And play is actually the key word here. I really think that reading the classics and discovering these allusions and being able to have deeper and more meaningful and funnier conversations is fun. It's a game. After that impromptu international readers convention that I took part in with the other girls in my student hostel, I did eventually get to read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And guess what? I hated it. I did not like Douglas Adams. And if I had already had that experience when they brought him up, I would have side-eyed them so hard. Or maybe not. I think I would have had some meaningful questions to ask. But the point is that a little extra knowledge never hurts. And a lifetime of reading is like a lifetime of gathering gemstones in endless side quests, and then coming together with other readers who are also on their side quests and comparing our collections of gemstones. Not because it's a competition, but because it's a conversation. So what do you think? Do you agree with me that the value of a canon is that it opens up a bigger and wider conversation that we can take part in? Or would you say the value of a canon actually lies somewhere else? Have you ever, like Judy Abbott, felt woefully ignorant of a book that everyone else seemed to know about and that you didn't? And if so, what was it? And when you finally read it, did you realize that they were right about it being good, or did you have a contrary opinion? Or have you had your turn as the knowledgeable one, helping to fill in a gap in a fellow reader's understanding? I think that this is a really interesting discussion to have, and I hope that you'll agree with me and chime in the comments.